Let's take a look at the conclusions and the results from our activity that was entitled Change in Seasons by Latitude. Here's a visual representation of the data that you had in your chart. The red represents the high temperatures in July, and the blue represents the high temperatures in January. And the number in black is the third column, which was the change in the temperature between summer and winter, January and July. So let's go look at these questions one by one. Let's look at Portland, San Francisco, and San Diego and answer the question, which one changes the most? Well, it was Portland. Portland changed by 34, whereas San Francisco and San Diego only changed by 9 and 10. So San Francisco changed the least. Portland changed the most. Now let's look at these three cities here, Dallas, Omaha, and Fargo. Which one changed the most? What was Fargo? Fargo was 82 in the summer and only 17 in the winter. Big change. Big difference between seasons, 65 degrees. Which one changed the least? Well, Dallas only changed 37. Omaha was kind of in between the two. Let's look at the East Coast. We go from Miami to Savannah to Virginia Beach to Boston. Miami only changes 12 degrees, whereas Boston changes 45. And you see these numbers kind of go in order. So which one changes the most was Boston. Which one changes the least was Miami. So what's the pattern then? And this isn't specifically a question on the question sheet, but this is what I wanted you to see. And that is that you have a greater change in temperatures between seasons the farther away you get from the equator. Or in our country, the more north you go. See, Portland changes by 34, whereas San Diego only changes 10. Miami changes 12, Boston changes 45. Dallas 37, Fargo 65. So the more you go away from the equator, the more your temperatures change between seasons. And that makes sense because you know that the light changes more as you go farther away from the equator. The closer you get to the equator, the more consistent your light is. So the more consistent your temperatures are going to be. The farther north you go, or the farther away from the equator, the more your light changes from summer to winter, so the more your temperatures are going to change from summer to winter. So if we went off this map and we went up into Canada, we would see this pattern continue. If we went to Alaska, you have a lot larger extreme in temperatures between summer and winter. Question number 4, Portland, Fargo, and Boston all have about the same latitude, or about the same distance from the equator. That means Fargo receives about the same amount of sunlight as Portland and Boston. So these three cities get about the same sunlight, but we see that they have very different temperatures. What could be causing that change in temperature? Well, we could have a difference in elevation, but as it turns out, Portland and Boston have exactly the same elevation. They're both at sea level. Fargo's elevation is not much more than sea level. So you got these three cities that have about the same latitude, so they get the same sunlight, but we see very different temperature patterns between them. But to answer question 5, Fargo gets about the same amount of sunlight. Let's look at their change in temperatures. Which one changes the most? Well, that's Fargo. Changes by 65. Which one changes the least? Is Portland. And Boston's kind of in between. So this one doesn't have quite as regular a pattern as we saw from south going north. San Diego, Dallas, and Savannah have about the same latitude, which means they should get about the same sunlight and have about the same temperatures. But which one changes the most? It's Dallas, changes by 37. Which one changes the least? San Diego, only by 10. And Savannah's kind of in between the two. Once again, it's not as quite a regular pattern as we saw going from south to north. There's another variable that's going to be in play here. So let's look at Fargo and San Diego. Which one would you expect to have the higher temperatures? Well, you expect San Diego because it's really far south and Fargo is really far north. But look at their July temperatures. Fargo is 82 and San Diego is only 76. Fargo is actually warmer than San Diego in July, even though it's a lot further north and it's getting less sunlight. Now let's look at Fargo and San Diego. Which one would you have expect to have higher temperatures. Same thing. We expect San Diego to be warmer, but let's look at January. In January, San Diego is warmer than Fargo. So that's kind of a tricky question because it depends upon, are we talking about summer or are we talking about winter? So the big conclusion in this is what you need to take away from this assignment, is that the further north you go, or the farther away from the equator, the greater the change between seasons. And we see that pretty much across the board. Now, left to right, east and west, we can't make that conclusion yet, but the farther you go away from the equator, the greater the change between seasons. So you go to Alaska, big difference between summer and winter. You go to Florida, not a big difference because you're closer to the equator. Beyond that, I've got some trick questions I want you to examine. Which is warmer, Portland or Boston? Well, it kind of depends, because in the summertime, Portland's 80 and Boston's 82. So Boston's warmer, right? But let's look at the wintertime. In the wintertime, Portland's 46 and Boston's 37. So Portland is warmer in the winter, but Boston is warmer in the summer. Which city is colder, Fargo or San Diego? It's the same thing. Well, in the summertime, San Diego is cooler than Fargo, but in the wintertime, Fargo is a lot cooler than San Diego. Which city is warmer, Virginia Beach or San Francisco? Well, in the summertime, Virginia Beach is 87, San Francisco is 67. Virginia Beach is a lot warmer. But in the wintertime, San Francisco is 58 and Virginia Beach is 50. So in the wintertime, San Francisco is warmer, but in the summertime, it's Virginia Beach. Which city is warmer, Dallas or Miami? In the summer, Dallas is 96, Miami's 85. So Dallas is warmer, right? But let's look at wintertime. In the wintertime, Dallas is 59, Miami's 73. Which city is colder, San Diego or Savannah? Well, in the summertime, San Diego's 76, Savannah's 92, so San Diego's colder, right? Not so fast. Let's look at wintertime. In wintertime, San Diego's 66, Savannah's only 61. So in the wintertime, San Diego is warmer, but in the summertime, Savannah's warmer. So these are all trick questions, because whether or not a city is hotter or colder kind of maybe sort of depends upon which season we're talking about. So it's not as easy anymore just to say, oh, I know it's further north, it's going to be hotter or colder. There's another variable in play that we're going to examine in our lab work tomorrow.